Hello, everybody. This is the Electric B2B show, and we are coming to you from an unusual location because we are in the heart of Budapest on a roof terrace in a co-working place that we are just testing out.
I could get used to this, definitely.
Yeah, we are at co-working division in Brody Sándor utca 25, if you're around here. And today we have an exciting topic for you because we're talking about how to niche down your service company's offerings if you are entering the international scene.
It's going to be a fun topic.
So listen closely. Hey Zoli, how is your back doing?
Doing better, a lot better. I had an injury actually a few weeks ago, a month ago about.
Okay, so did you go to the doctor and did you get all checked up? And
Yeah, I got checked up and I get the discs that were dislocated put back into their right places.
Right, okay. And did you go to a generalist or did you go to a specialist doctor?
No, definitely a specialist. It was an orthopedic surgeon I went to.
No way. Why didn't you just go to a generalist?
I mean, I guess when people want to get something done, they need a solution for something specific. They want to find someone that knows how to do the specific thing.
That's right. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, it's the same way with your clients. If you are a professional services agency, consultancy, service provider, such as a deaf company who does IT solutions for companies. And that's what today's episode is going to be about. So this is specifically for development companies who are looking to expand internationally on the global scene. So if you're a company located somewhere in Europe or South America, Asia or Africa, and you're eyeing with the United States or the UK or just the global market in general because you want to head out into more adventurous waters, then we are going to have some very good advice for you based on some recent experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so welcome to the show, everybody. And let's dive right into it because what we want to talk about today is something super important and a very misunderstood concept at the same time. Because what we've been seeing as a result of having worked with a few development companies is that they have a good problem, which is that they are very proficient at a lot of things and have experience in a lot of industries.
Yeah.
Right. And why is that a problem? Well, it's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem, especially when you want to go international. Because what happens on the international market is what worked back home, and that is having expertise and having references and projects for a decade and a half in a lot of instances with in several sectors and several solution areas. So let's say you can do IT development, you can do Android development, iOS, you can do cloud development, you can do apps. And a lot of companies have grown to a considerable size, having proficiency in all of these areas across a variety of sectors, from retail to banking to healthcare to financials, you name it, agriculture even, okay? And why is that, Zoli? Why is this a disadvantage when you're trying to go with this background on the international scene?
Yeah. So yeah, when you're working back at home, somewhere where you have probably a presence of 10 to 15 years, a huge knowledge base, you know a lot of people, you have contacts, it's much easier to build out your own presence. It's much easier to build out your own sort of circle that you're working in. The people know you, people know that what sort of solutions you have. When you're moving out to a bigger market, what happens is that the competition is going to be a lot stronger. There's going to be companies that have the same sort of presence that you have back at home, but with more money, probably more connections that you do. And it's sort of the same idea why I went to a specialty doctor.
Because you weren't in a village.
Yeah, exactly. If you live in a small place with like a couple of hundred people, you probably have like 2 to 3 GPs that can solve everything. Any sort of issue that you have, you can go to the same sort of doctors. But when you move to a big town, a large city, what happens is that now you can go to specialty people. Now you can have that special need checked out with someone who is just an expert with that one thing.
Exactly. Okay. So that's the thing. When you want to stand out in bigger competition, you need to specialize. And that's just true in every single market throughout all of history. If you just think about doctors, how doctors went from being generalists all the way to being specialists. So you would have back, I don't know, in the beginning of the 20th century, you would have a general doctor taking care of teeth. You didn't have such thing as dentists. And then as the whole profession matured, you would have, now you have, I don't know, orthopedians and dentists and the 97 types of different doctors. But then as each of the areas or professional areas within dentistry are getting more and more complex, you have specializations within that. And it's apparent in the fact, like last time I went to get a root canal fixed, and I was told that there are doctors specializing in
Just for root canals.
yeah, just for the messed up types of root canals that I have, which are the ones where the end ends up turning and the regular tools can't really fill them. So I was told to go to the specialist doctor for like 4 times the amount of money,
Right.
because I had a special case. But even for root canals, you have doctors or dentists having specialized.
And there was
Okay.
a really important line there because you said for 4 times the amount of money.
Exactly, which is the other point.
Yeah, so when you find a specialty, that means that there is something that you on your own can solve. Usually when you move out to an international market, if you want to find work quick and easy, it's a lot easier, well, it's easier at least to find a subcontractor job. So it's easier to have a huge dev company which is at home at that market, which then is looking for subcontractors for specialty problems that they want to get solved.
Yeah, and it seems like, well, it's a little bit better money than what we get at home. We don't have to mess around with sales and marketing, and bam, we are working on the international scene. And you may already be doing this, but there are several drawbacks to this, aren't there, Zoltan?
Yeah. So one is that obviously you're not going to have your own identity or your own brand built up by subcontracting to bigger companies, because the customers that are going to go to the big development company, they won't necessarily know about you. They don't know your specialties. They won't know what your brand stands for. What they will know is that there is the big development company, and obviously it will subcontract some of it work to other smaller companies.
Exactly. You can't use this project as a case study or a reference. When you're a subcontractor, 99% of the time, you can't use it.
So you can't even use those references back at home.
Exactly. Is it scalable? Maybe. Somewhat, but you don't have control over the situation and over your fate. That's for sure. Whereas if you have a separate brand, a separate identity, you are quote unquote forced to build up a brand and a sales and a marketing process. You are forced to get to know the market and the customers better. So you end up building something that is a real business.
Exactly. And a really important point is this as well, is that when you're subcontracting, it's much more difficult to find stuff that you like to do, that you're actually happy to do, which means that you can end up, maybe you can scale it up, maybe you will find a lot of subcontracting work, maybe the big dev company is going to use you on a next project, or maybe even reference you to other large dev companies, but it will be a lot more difficult to find something or find projects that you can actually cherry pick and that people who work for you like to do.
Yeah, and that's another important point, that another important benefit of big international projects is from the eyes of your people, of your employees working on big international and exciting projects. If you work as a subcontractor, then that isn't really the case, because you don't really have that much control over the project. And I guess one could argue that it's not a real international identity, or not a real international presence if you are just working as a subcontractor. Okay, so, but regardless of that, if you have the chance and there's a good project being offered to you where you can work as a subcontractor, go for it. Go for it. Just don't count on this being the vehicle to step on the international scene, because you cannot spare the homework of building out a presence and a brand. Okay, so the first thing you do before doing anything else is determine how you will niche down. You have to go from knowing everything and having competence in everything on earth that is related to development and IT, to actually picking, 1, a niche, and 2, a solution area. Let me give you an example. The most recent case was with a data science / development company that we're working with out of Budapest. And of course, they had references from government, so like public sector, to banks and energy and utility companies, retail and everything else. And they did mobile development, apps, data science, data platforms, and everything that has to do with data. And they were very aware that this is not going to cut it on the international market. So what we did was we had this formal process of finding a niche, a vertical and a solution area. And they ended up choosing retail, and within that, druggeries, drugstores, and concentrating only on data science solutions. Now, that's not to say that when you acquire a client and you start working for them and the positive feelings are mutual and you're getting them results, that you cannot sell other services of yours. You certainly can, and you should. But when you're building an international presence, what you want is to be known for one thing in one market. And that's going to give you a huge competitive advantage over everyone else, who in turn has the advantage of having been there for a decade or more.
Yeah.
Okay, Zoli, let's look at the process of niching down, okay?
Okay. So what I would say, there are a bunch of steps that you might want to go through when you're trying to find that one particular specialty that you will offer. And as Dan said, obviously it's not something that you have to keep on offering. It's not something that you solely have to focus on the future, but it's something that you want to start with. So I think the most important thing at first is to find something that people working for you like to do the most. And it seems trivial enough, but it really is important, because just when we talked about subcontracting and not being able to find or choose the jobs that you would most want to do, obviously it's always important to find the sort of projects that you're happy to do, that it's fun to do. So that's one point. The second one is, what do you have most references for? So what is something that you have done a lot of work for, as you said, for the public sector, for utility companies, for energy companies, whatever. So we've seen a lot of development companies who have like 1 million references from 1 million different fields that they did before, but a lot of those they can't use.
Yeah.
Exactly for the reasons that you've talked about before. So when I say what is the field that you have the most references for, I mean what is the field that you've worked for on your own, not as a subcontractor, that you can actually reference, that you can actually talk about.
That you're allowed to use legally.
Yeah, exactly. So another important question is, what is a field that you have enough in-house human resources for? A lot of development companies that we work with sometimes have human resources that is actually outsourced. So it's not in-house knowledge or not in-house personnel that they have.
You think it's there, but it really isn't.
Yeah, it's just contractors again. Which is great, but obviously when you are trying to move to a new international market, you want to try and allocate your resources in a way that it wouldn't hurt the work that you're doing back home.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's enough that it would create a good enough for people that you're starting to work for on a new market. And then it's also really important to find something that you can easily scale up. So obviously don't choose something that you really like to do, that you have references in, but you don't really have human resources for to be able to scale it up quickly and easily. And then the last point is, what do you have the most experience in?
Or at least a lot of experience.
Or at least a lot of experience, yeah.
Experience in.
So with the data science company that we are working with now, obviously the most trivial field to choose was data analytics. They have done a lot of other work as well. They have done applications, they have done mobile applications, they have done a lot of different work in different fields. But what they have the most knowledge in and the most experiences in is obviously data analytics. So that's what we are focusing on when moving them to a new market.
Right. And last but not least, or almost the most important one, was what is there an actual need for on the given international market? On the destination market. So it's not enough to be in love with a certain area, like let's say creating apps for BlackBerry, but there's probably not a market for that, even though you might enjoy doing it. Okay, so that's just an extreme example to really illustrate the fact that you actually have to do market research and determine what there is a need for currently.
Yeah, I guess what might be a more relatable example is that a lot of European companies want to move out to the US, which makes sense because it's a large market. It seems really glamorous from back Europe, but it might actually be more sensible to move to a market that has a similar sort of business scene that what you are used to.
Yeah, a similar scene, similar culture, and less competition. Because let's face it, in IT, the most competitive market, without a secret, is the United States. And the UK is up there as number 2. But if you want to go Anglo-Saxon, there's Australia, which is a considerable market and probably easier to penetrate, although being not very close to Europe or South America, but it's there. But within Europe, what's really hot right now and up and coming and a great market to sell into is Scandinavia, because they are very advanced digitally, very open-minded, and they're just easier to sell to than a lot of the other cultures and countries. Let's talk about a negative example as well. So what's a developed market in the European region that is not easy to sell into? And what I hear from our clients is that, especially if you're shooting at mid-sized or small companies and not necessarily the enterprise space, then the DACH region, so Switzerland, Germany, and Austria, a lot of the family-owned companies, we've been told by clients, are quite conservative. So they will be slow and very cautious to move ahead with anything that has to do with technology, especially if you're coming from the outside, so if you're not from the DACH region. So even though it's a lucrative opportunity in terms of purchasing power and market size, culturally it's a bit of a tougher nut to crack.
So in short, what I guess what we are trying to say is when you're building a go-to strategy to a new market, what you want to take into account is go to a market that is big enough that it can host new competition or new companies, but not too big that you get lost in a billion other companies that are doing almost the same thing that you are offering, or offering the same thing as you are. And as you said, it's really important to find a market that has similar cultural backgrounds as you do, just because it's easier to sell to people who are similar to you, who are doing business dealings in a similar way as you do. And if you're going to a region, as you said, which is more conservative, it's really good to have a person who was brought up there, who was raised there, and who knows the market well enough that he or she can sell what you are selling easier with more internal knowledge.
Yes. So to summarize how to niche down and how to move to the international scene, we talked about several factors, such as what you have expertise in, what you can scale, what your colleagues enjoy doing, what is needed on the market. And the idea is not to make this an overly scientific process, because what we did with the data company that we mentioned is that we made it like super scientific. Like we had the 4 or 5 leaders from the company sit down and rate each solution area from 1 to 5 and each market from 1 to 5, and then we would take the average of their ratings and try to come up with something. And then in the end, one of the executives just said, fuck it, let's do this. We love retail and we love data analytics, so let's just do that. But this formal process was needed to get there, to get to that point where we can say, okay, so from the 10 or 15 possibilities, these 3 are the ones which really interest us, and then they just listen to their heart and pick the one which they stuck with. Okay, and then sometimes a factor might be more important than the other ones. So with another client who is deciding to go with the VR solutions, is a major factor for them was that they will eventually want to create a product, so they want to productize their service offerings, and VR was the most sensible one to pick, and also it's what excited them the most. So the interest or the fun factor was a super important one in their case.
Yeah, and I think also when you're trying to choose a new country, definitely don't just fall in love with one. It is obviously a good thing if you have something in your mind that for some reason seems like a good option and you researched it well. But I would say choose at least 3, maybe 4 options that you can then filter down. Because if you are laser focused on just one country and for some reason it turns out that it's actually more difficult to move into the country when you get some knowledge from local people there or local businesses there, and you realize what happened with us with the data science company, and you realize that maybe it would be better to move to a different area. If you haven't researched any other options, then that won't be that much fun to just get stuck with that one option.
Exactly. Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, that's that. Thank you for watching and listening. And we are coming back to you with episode 20 very soon. All right.
A big celebration for that one.